All right. That's the end of the game. Cris Tales conquered. Ah. All right. Uh this was a very, very interesting journey for me. But glad it's over. I had some enjoyment with this. But overall thoughts regarding Cris Tales, I'm kind of honestly on the fence about it. I did have some fun with the game, but I'm not really on board with the story. I think the story has a lot of aspects to it that I don't necessarily vibe with. And I think the mechanics stop short of exploring like cool stuff. Like it introduces a cool concept and then it doesn't take it any further than that. And I guess I just needed it to go that little extra mile or explore just a little bit more for me to enjoy the mechanical aspect. And then the story just needed to be taken in a different direction or approached in a different way for me to fully be on board with it. So I guess as a whole, I wasn't really. I guess I didn't enjoy it as much as I wish I did, which is a shame, I suppose. Story, was it satisfying? I'm gonna say no on this one. There could be like an after credit scene, but I think there was just a lot of information that was either glossed over, not mentioned at all, left to too much interpretation, and not really any explanation. And I don't necessarily want to say that if you're doing a time travel game that you should probably make your ending be very clear. But I certainly wish that that was the case. And I don't think the ending sequence really like stuck the landing for me. It didn't make me feel like the cap off to the journey was something that made the journey or the missteps with the journey kind of brought back. Or I'm trying to stay away from saying worth it, because that's not what I want to say, but there are things that happened in the journey, and then the ending does not like establish itself as kind of like, I did this journey and now I get all the answers that I wanted. And there were lots of answers provided, but they were very short and succinct answers. And maybe that's where the issues start beginning for me. Did it feel complete? I mean, I guess. We resolved the Time Empress stuff. We resolved the Rena stuff, and yeah, I guess we could say it feels complete. How was the pacing? I think this game is a great example of the pacing of a game being like lightning fast. We are moving from plot point to plot point extremely quickly, and I think it's too fast. I think this game would benefit from slowing down a little bit and letting letting the story breathe, for a moment. Let the characters take in the moments and figure out what's going to happen next. So in that aspect, I would say the pacing was poor because it was too fast, as opposed to being too slow or just all over the place. For my thoughts on the story, I think the story is moving too fast and is the crux of all the issues. There rarely seems to be moments of reflection or clarity, and because of this, it feels like I'm experiencing a story outline rather than plot events that flow into one another. This was something that I wrote, I guess, fairly early on, and I find it really difficult to kind of figure out where the storytelling went wrong for me, because it does happen so quickly, but that's not necessarily the issue. There's also the aspect of, like the characters could elaborate things more, but that's not necessarily the issue. So maybe it's just a lot of compound issues that are just creating something that's not as enjoyable as it could be. Because I do feel that characters could have talked more. They could have discussed things amongst themselves more. They could have elaborated on things. The Audrey side quest where we go into that extra area and there was this guy named Alexander there, that's a perfect example of what the game overall was. We go there, but we don't really have any information on why we're going there or why it's important to go there. We're just going there, and then we're given this item that we're told that we'll need, but we don't necessarily get any information on why it's important or how we know it's important. We just know that we're going to need it. And then when we get to the final boss, it's like, oh, use this item. This item is going to create another item, and that item is going to save this boss. And it's like, we didn't get any of that information prior. We didn't get any backstory to what's going on. We didn't get any present story or any future story of what's going to happen. It's just kind of like thrown at us, and we just do it. And in the end, we save Alexander, and that's it. We get a cutscene where he's saved, and Audrey and Alexander, I guess, are happy or something like that, and that's literally it. There's no elaboration. There's no post-fight discussion on what just happened and how things are going to change in the world and how our characters are now affected by this. And we don't learn who Alexander was and what he was doing and how his presence in the world has changed things. We don't get any of that. It's just like it ends right there, and then it disappears as if nothing ever happened. And I feel like that really is a testament to, maybe a testament's probably the wrong word, but a testament to like what this game has done with its story and how it's approached its characters in the story. It's just all very abrupt, I guess. The world building feels so sparse and elaboration feels lacking. As an example, Christopher joins the party, but I don't recall any reason why he sticks around in the beginning. Later we get a reasoning, but it lacks depth. So yeah, these issues happen at the very beginning of the game. Christopher just teleports in for some reason, and we just start working together. But we don't ask him, like, oh, who are you? Where did you come from? Why are you here? Why are you helping me out? Is there a reason why you just teleported here randomly to help me out? Like, how did this all fall into place? It's just he joins the party and now we're working together. it's weird. It's awkward to kind of have scenarios play out that way, especially when it's so, I guess, ubiquitous throughout the entire game. Like it's a consistent thing that occurs throughout multiple plot points and multiple characters and discussions and topics and things like that. The story seems like it wants to do a lot, but doesn't really have the space for it. I'm reminded of Legend of Korra in this scenario, where instead of trying to create something grand or sprawling, something smaller or more self-contained would have aided it greatly. So, The Legend of Korra is a show that was on Nickelodeon that was like a sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And Legend of Korra had grand ideas, and they tried to fit in a ton of stuff into something so small. When, from my point of view, creating something like small and self-contained would have been a superior project. And I think this game would have benefited from a similar approach. I think the Time Empress plotline was really nice. I think they could have stopped there, or they could have made the entire story about the Rena. I was forgetting what they were, and go with that. But I think because the majority of the game was focused on the Time Empress, and then the later half was on the Rena, it feels like there's conflict in how much can be told throughout the rest of the game, because, you know, something has to be devoted here, something has to be devoted there. I think, from my point of view, if the game was focused on the Time Empress exclusively, and then it was further condensed, I think this game would have benefited greatly for that. Like, it wouldn't have been crazy to me if there were 3 cities or less that you visit in total, but the dialogue amongst the characters and the story were drastically improved. I don't think the cities really add much of anything to the story as a whole. We just learn that the Time Empress is manipulating things, and things are, you know, going for the worse. But, you know, you can get that impression in like one city, and you can lock in that the Time Empress is bad and she's doing terrible, oh my gosh, terrible things in other or in that one city. And then you can move on to like trying to stop her, like directly trying to stop her. So I guess that's how I would have liked to see it be approached, just because it would allow the characters to talk about these scenarios more, to figure out what they want to do, and actually explore the world around them and how it's changing, and how they are going to revert it back to what it should be, or change it for the better with the Time Empress being gone. I wish Wilhelm's big reveal and sacrifice played out better. His story of locking himself in a child's body to preserve the final X seconds of his life for the right moment to weaken the Time Empress is very cool. Sadly, he just dies and is forgotten about. The whole Wilhelm reveal there at the Time Empress fight was super cool. Like, it was unbelievably cool. If I had to rate one idea in this game that was fantastic and above all the others, it would be that one. And if they played that out with just like more, if they built up to that moment a little bit more, if we got like actual hints that he was, you know, like the hero basically, And then we got to that point, he sacrifices himself, and our characters get distraught, and they kind of lose hope, because on one hand, yeah, we weakened the Time Empress, but we also lost our like greatest ally. Apparently my camera froze. That would have just been like amazing in my eyes. It's I guess perhaps a little ambitious, but it would have been, I would have enjoyed it a lot. Give me a second. Had to plug in camera again. Don't do this to me. There we go. You missed the end? You did miss the end, Morganites, guys. Sorry about that. Let's see. There are many moments in the game where something important happens, or something important is happening, such as a dragon raising a city, or the Time Empress progressing her master plan, and a vote, or a vote to elect the next leader, and the party decides to run off and go do something, as if the world will wait up for them. This was very weird. This happened multiple times. And it first happened with the vote to elect Enzo as like the supreme chancellor of the game, or not of the game, of the town. And it was just kind of weird. Like, there's a vote going on. If we're going to do something to stop this vote, we needed to have gotten that information before. But as soon as we leave, they're going to vote. He's going to become the Supreme Chancellor. And then, you know, presumably we can't really do anything to stop him. But we leave anyways. And then it happens later on where the Time Empress is like, aha, I'm at the final place to complete my final plan. And we're just like, oh, we're just going to run off and go turn off some ruined computers, you know, just hang tight, you know, we'll be back. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. Oh my goodness. You just realized you could get this on the PlayStation 5? Oh, there you go. There you go. There you go. For gameplay mechanics and design, what gameplay elements stand out? The controls leave something to be desired. This was something that I kind of experienced throughout the game, and I think I think there could be some improvements. It's probably too late to do any improvements, but you're unable to move the past and future panes. So like, you know, you have the triangle, and you have the future, then you have the past. And you can't like move them from side to side. And really the only way you can do that is by like going to like the edges of maps and things like that. I feel like that's a missed opportunity. We get to see these really nice backdrops of the future and the past and the present. It would be really nice if we could scroll them side to side to actually see what we're looking at and how things are changing based off of the actions that we're taking. Instead of pressing X to enter time hop and then choose a direction from a TS on a controller, pressing one of the triggers would have been smoother. I think this was another one of those missed opportunities. You know, the controller has shoulder buttons and it has trigger buttons. I guess not really being... Y'all know what a controller looks like. And to my recollection, none of those buttons were actually utilized. And I think it would have benefited from that. It would have sped things up greatly. On top of that, Matthias moves so slow during the time hop, which is very obnoxious. I don't know why this is a thing, but that sucker's speed needs to be increased by like 1,000%. I don't know why he moves so slow. Anyways, there's a delay from when commands are input to when actions happen. It's there when progressing dialogue, inputting commands. This is a kind of a weird thing. And I don't necessarily want to say this is a negative thing. It's just something you have to get used to. But it's something that I am not like 100% familiar with a lot. And so when it happens, it's like you press the button and you're like, like, is something going to happen? And then something happens. So it's a little awkward. Let's see. I'm unable to see what stats do and how they affect a character. Does speed make my character appear in the timeline sooner, or does it give them more turns? Yeah, it would just be really nice to not have to assume what stats do. I know it's very silly to say like, well, okay, you don't know what strength does, that's going to increase your attack, or you don't know what magic defense does. But in the same way that you have to provide like tutorials to teach people how to play games, you also have to provide tutorials to teach people what your mechanics do and how those mechanics interact with the characters and the spells and things like that. And there's really no explanation about that. There's a lot of terminology in this game that you kind of just have to assume to know what they do. And I think that can be improved. There could be a glossary. There could be some screenshots and things like that. Saying like, this is what this means, and this is how this interacts with this. And speed makes your turns happen sooner, and they give you more turns. Who knows? The options for the game are lacking. There's only audio and graphic tabs, and they are very bare bones. I would have liked to see control remapping, monitor placements, FPS controls, among other standard options nowadays. This was another thing that was a little disappointing as well. These are the graphical options, and the sound options. It's very bare bones, and I definitely would have liked to see more. Apparently, I was playing in 1080p. Oh. So yeah, I wish there was more options. The sound options doesn't seem to interact with all sounds. After beating a battle, the experience bar increasing sound is loud, despite all of the sounds being, relatively quiet in relation to the bar or the setting, the sound setting. The animated movies in the game are insanely loud compared to everything else and seem to ignore sound settings entirely. I wish the movies would, trigger or have their sounds tied to the sound settings. Even just throw in another sound setting, movie sound, and once you hear the first one and it blows out your ears, you know to turn it down. Time travel as a whole is underutilized both mechanically and with story. As a time mage, the possibilities seem vast, but there has been a lack of powerful options, and with them, consequences. When we take something from the past, the present doesn't change. So this was something that has occurred multiple times, but I think the most memorable one for me was taking the doll from the grave in Cinder from the past and giving it to Gally in the present. I feel like there should be consequences for that. Are we just to assume that Gally never visits the grave ever again, and she wouldn't notice that her doll was missing? she wouldn't put another doll there, or try to make up for the fact that, you know, her memento that she dedicated to her mom that died is missing, and she put one back. It's kind of weird. There's no indication what time period the past and future exist in, but the story utilizes it as if you can move freely through it. However, nothing else reflects that, be it in the art, character, or interactions. So what I mean by this is we see the past in the pain, but let's just say that we see the past 5 years ago. There are scenarios that occur in the game where we go back in time further than 5 years or earlier than 5 years, but that's not really reflected in the past window pane that we were given, and you know, same thing for the future. So if it's just a nebulous like time where you can go whatever time period you want, the art doesn't reflect that. And so it creates confusion for me, because it's like, how are you going back in time 50 years when 50 years looks exactly the same as, or like the past window pane does not reflect 50 years ago in comparison to the present. And it gets even worse, because there's some scenarios where you may go 50 years ago and you may go 5 years ago in the same location, but you know, they don't like tell you that. So it created an awkwardness with me. Despite everything, we've only sent Matthias through time. Why not send a party member? Why not save someone from death or ensure someone's death? I feel like this was a really big missed opportunity for time travel. How is it that we can send Matthias back in time, but we can't send someone else? Why doesn't Cris go back in time to affect something? Why doesn't she talk to people, learn information? It would be really cool to go back in time, talk to somebody, go to the present, go talk to them again and be like, oh, I remember you. I talked to you at this moment and you were doing this and all that other stuff. Like, those types of moments would be really cool. But it, like, none of that stuff is utilized. Crisbell's new power acquisitions really lacked impact and flair. There are even some moments where her powers are completely undermined, like Azufra's death. Much like how a lot of story elements were very abrupt and didn't really like do anything or elaborate on things, Crisbell's powers also had a similar effect to them, where like we would get them and then like that was it. Our ability to freeze time, I think we used that twice. But we didn't have that ability in combat. That would have been an amazing ability in combat. We got an ability to like age someone, I guess, backwards or something like that. But we only used that once. It would have been really cool if we could use that as like a single target ability in combat to age somebody without aging any of the other combatants. That would have been pretty cool. There's just, I guess, so many ideas that the game implemented, but didn't take any further other than like these very specific story moments. And then it just like they were forgotten about. And, you know, Crisbell's treated as I guess, the most powerful time mage, but, you know, she doesn't use her powers. She just sends things into the future and sends things into the past, and that's it. And then like the Azufra's death thing, where like we actually do get a powerful ability, and then, you know, Azufra just dies anyways, you know, and it was awkward. The issue with the mana signet bugs me. Ultimately, I blame myself for not reading and the UI for not giving me all the information necessary. I purchased an item that in the moment wasn't very useful and was very expensive. So essentially for this one, I didn't read like the full descriptive text. I've been ignoring the full descriptive text for pretty much every item and reading the bottom text for the items, because that's where the pertinent information was in my eyes. And I didn't think that there would be any information that wasn't just like fluff describing the item in the descriptive text. But I was wrong. There's information there that actually tells you important information about how the item works, such as the mana signet, reducing your mana by 250. That's a lot. When I bought that and it didn't work like I thought it did, because I thought it was just going to give 15% mana regen, I was very confused, and it took me a hot second to understand where it went wrong for me. And like, while I own up to that mistake, I think the UI could have presented that information in a clearer way. You don't get to see mana reduction or maybe even health increase or decrease in the shop when you're purchasing items. You just get to see like the normal stat increases. And I think they should add those, or they should expand upon the descriptive or the actual text at the bottom to include the pertinent information that is in the descriptive text as well. We're getting there. The introduction of Kari as a party member so late in the game as a blue mage is the peak of late party member introduction annoyance. So I always have a problem with party members being introduced late in the game, because they usually have a plethora of problems associated with them. It's either the party member is under-leveled, they don't have any equipment, you have to buy all their equipment, you have to learn all of their skills and figure out if they're useful, you have to compare them against all your other party members, and you essentially have to put in a lot of time and effort and work into figuring out if they're useful. Whereas these characters that you've had for 10, 20 plus hours, you kind of know the ins and outs of how they work and how useful they are. And so getting a party member so late in the game, it's basically just not worth it to even use them, because they could be the most powerful character in the game, but you have to learn them. You have to put in all that effort into doing so when your current party is working just fine. It's like you don't need to change anything. So I like to see characters introduced like the first half of the game at the latest. And that gives you an opportunity to make those decisions. There's a cardinal sin that I'll talk about later, but it also helps that you can choose whatever character you want to at any moment and not have any restrictions to influence that decision. And yeah, so it's mostly egregious with Kari because her entire shtick is that she gets abilities from monsters that she captures, but she's introduced late in the late game. So the thought here is that, you're about to beat the game, but now you have this character that doesn't do anything unless you go back to all these other areas and capture monsters. Now, fortunately for the game, they send you back to those areas, but in the moment you don't know that. And even after experiencing the fact that you're going to go back and go do all those things, it's still one of those situations where you're putting a party member into your party, or a new character into your party, to see if they are going to be useful. And you have to invest all that time to do it. You have to capture all those monsters. You have to do the fights a specific way so that you can increase your chances of capturing them. Meanwhile, all of your other characters are falling further behind, and this character is catching up. And so let's just say you know, 5 levels later, you decide, well, this character is actually not that good. Now you have to catch up the character that's 5 levels behind, and it becomes rough times. Okay, can't use time powers in dungeons. This was a giga missed opportunity for me. It was really, really strange to just see the window panes go away in the dungeons and there not be any interaction with time powers whatsoever in dungeons. For me, I feel like this game is very much a game about time travel and how the mechanics are being used to influence time. I think we can all fairly agree on that. But to ignore dungeons completely, you could have puzzles, you could have various interactions that work with time. Like I guess puzzles is probably the full extent of it, but like it's just a huge missed opportunity. I really wonder why they didn't choose to include that, or at least acknowledge it in any way. You know, like, oh, you know, the energies in this area are influencing my time powers and I can't use them. I don't know. For combat, the combat was initially very intriguing, but I needed it to expand or go somewhere to fully hook me, and it didn't do that. So I liked the idea of being able to send enemies into the future and send enemies to the past, but that's where it stopped. I think there's a lot of missed opportunities to do more here, and that just wasn't really done. I like that you can make enemies older or younger, and I like that changes them. It changes their appearance, and it changes how they attack, maybe what attacks they're using, and maybe they cast buffs. It changes their weaknesses. I think that's all very cool stuff. You got to learn, you know, what enemies do what and how they interact with the different time periods. It's very cool and extremely smart that you can use the time fields to manipulate buffs and debuffs. This was an incredibly cool idea. If you apply a buff to somebody on the right side, and then you send them into or if you apply like poison to somebody on the right side, which is like the future area, and then you send them into the future, they take all the damage that buff would do up front. That's super cool. Additionally, if you have somebody, let's say they're already in the future field, and they get a buff or they get a debuff or whatever, you can remove the future field and it gets rid of their debuff or their buff. I didn't actually test that on anybody that would actually work on, but I think for like a heal over time it would have, well, anyways, super cool. I would have never thought about that, and I applaud that idea. However, it's very disappointing that time manipulation has no use on the party. I feel like this was a huge missed opportunity. Imagine if we could have the ability to send like a specific party member, or maybe all the party members, forward or back in time to manipulate how their weaknesses are approached and how their stats are configured. It would be super cool to send Cris into the future, and she looks like the Time Empress, and maybe like briefly she can start utilizing Time Empress abilities. we could send Christopher into the past and, he's a sucker foo. And it's like, oh no, we accidentally sent him into the past. Like, it would be cool. It would be cool if the enemies were doing that kind of stuff too. Just neat ideas that I think would be par for the course for a game like this, but weren't really touched upon. Manipulating enemies via each zone is a must-have skill to employ good strategy, but it's locked on JKR 721 and bosses are immune. So, Christopher also has that ability, but yeah, bosses are immune. In the end, it wasn't really a necessary power to have, but the ability to rearrange enemies on the field so that you can manipulate them in the past or the present just seems like a really good idea. And like, why wouldn't you allow that to be possible for bosses? You can strategize with these bosses in many more ways with that way. You can make these bosses a little bit more difficult that way. Especially for the bosses that are able to negate the time powers or utilize time powers of their own. I think it's just another missed opportunity. Many bosses are immune to time powers, and plenty of bosses don't change enough when they are affected by them. I didn't really like this at all. Like, the Time Empress, I think that one is like, okay, you got it. You're the Time Empress. You can manipulate time. Like, you're the OG time boss. I got you. But there should be opportunities, even for the Time Empress, to utilize time powers to weaken or accidentally strengthen her. Imagine how cool it would be to send the Time Empress to the past and see her become Cris Bell in the fight and be like, well, hold on a second, like, what the heck just happened? Or maybe it triggers like an event in combat. I know this is going like way off the deep end now, but it triggers like an event in combat where maybe she blocks it or something like that. But if you use it multiple times or something like that, or you do it when she's at lower HP, so that, the reveal's a little bit more crazy, she becomes Cris Bell, and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. The immunity to the time powers ultimately just made those bosses not feel fun or exciting, because the entire, like, one of the entire points of the combat is you have these cool time powers to change the battlefield, essentially. And when bosses don't interact with that, you just have a normal fight, basically. It doesn't feel remarkable. A random encounter is more remarkable than a fight that ignores the time powers. Let's see. The clarity of doing parries can be very difficult. I had a lot of struggles with this. There are some abilities that I think you can't parry, and I don't think there's really any information to let you know that they can or can't be parried. It's possible that I'm just mistiming them, but ultimately that's like the entire point that I'm trying to make, is that the information being given to me is not clear enough on how well I'm timing my parry versus whether it can't be timed at all. I don't know if I'm looking for like a little white flash or if I'm timing it to the sound. I wish there was a consistent identifier of some sort to let me know. I don't know what's going on with some of these bosses, but their levels and HP values are getting out of hand. The princesses, Kari, and the Time Empress were insanely taxing fights that went on for far too long. I'm gonna have to look up these fights at some point, because I spent like 45 minutes to an hour on some of those fights, and they took way too long. There were no other fights in this game that took that long. The final boss didn't take that long. And obviously, you know, I have some really good equipment at the end of the game. But even at the point where I was at, like, I didn't feel like I was weak. These bosses just had a ton of HP, and they had high defenses. And, you know, I think I ran away from like less than 15 encounters, and those encounters like effectively didn't matter. You know, I was with Kari trying to find various things, and this was like after those fights basically. So just very very out of place fights, I suppose. The Time Empress fight was also very confusing, in that I more or less couldn't die. One of the strangest mega showdown fights I've experienced. Yeah. To have what is effectively like the final boss in that moment, and the only thing the boss is doing is reducing you to 1 HP and in healing herself, it's kind of anticlimactic. It's not very exciting or fun to kind of realize that, and then like for me it got to the point where I said like, okay, I should start this over, because this character composition is just absolutely atrocious. And you know, she was doing a very poor job of killing me. So what was I gonna do? I never tried running away from bosses. That would have been something I would have liked to get, but it made that fight not as interesting as it could be. And I feel like if there is one fight in this game that should have been epic and awesome, it would have been that fight. The Ardo fight, whatever. But the Time Empress fight, I wanted that one to be above all the other fights, and it might have been one of the worst. The Time Empress fight in Crystalline really emphasized to me how little space the party actually gets. The fight arena is so large, but the enemies get the lion's share of it, which has negatively impacted me when it comes to move timings, camera movements, UI dedication. So I actually want to illustrate this, because when I wrote this down, I was like, what are we talking about? But this was actually a bigger deal than I thought it was. Look at this space allocation. We get this tiny little area. Come on, man. We get this tiny little area over here to do what we want. Our like stuff blocks her. The bar up here is blocking her buffs, and this is something that I don't have written down, but her buff goes away sometimes when she's doing attacks or she's taking attacks, which kind of interrupts what you want to do. But look at all this, like this empty space over here that is just not being utilized. I would have loved to see, you know, her get pushed back so that I have more room to actually do things. You know, like if I'm being attacked by that circle attack, like it's so hard to see, and that happened in the final fight. So that's something that occurred, and I realized, and I was like, wow, give me some room over here. It was crazy stuff. Where did I leave off? Why does Wilhelm's plant take so long to trigger? In the final Kari fight, it took 7 literal minutes to trigger, and who knows how many turns. So this will probably be something that I'll count out whenever I get to this game for like an encounter report. But to plant a heal, like a rejuvenation Yakandra, it took like 7 real world minutes for it to trigger. That is a ridiculously long time. It would be nice if there was like a turn counter associated with it, or some sort of indication to know how long it's going to take to trigger. And I also think that the trigger time should be reduced drastically. Takes way too long. For dungeons, I don't really have anything to say about dungeons other than there are some serious practical dungeon design issues in a lot of places. Crazy stuff. For Cardinal Sins, backup party earns less experience, 0 experience in fact, which is the worst because it's like negative experience almost. But this kind of goes back to the whole trying out new party members and getting punished to do it, and that you should be allowed to use whatever party members you feel are appropriate for any given time. And in order to facilitate that, they need to be of the level that the rest of your party members are, so that they can participate efficiently. Removing a key party member without sufficient replacement. Christopher was removed, and we got Zaz, who is not Christopher, and Wilhelm died, and we never got Wilhelm back or any of his powers back other than track, but the track was a worse track. And so that was very, very sad. I probably would have used Wilhelm for the entire game if he never died. I was actually thinking that he would come back. I was waiting for like a side quest or some moment where it's like, oh, we can go back in time and save Wilhelm and bring him back or something like that. I was really hoping that would happen. Never did. Also tied to this removing key party member without sufficient replacement, you don't get their equipment back. This is like totally insane. Absolutely totally insane. Wilhelm had some great equipment on, and it's gone. No more equipment for me. Doesn't get put back in the inventory. It's just gone. And when you're in the shops, it tells you that you have that equipment still on party members, which, you know, is another little like stab to the gut. For miscellaneous sound and music, there was some nice music in this game. Like even this little this title screen music, like I actually like it. It's soothing and it's nice. It's very low tempo, and I've enjoyed the music in this game. It's not very often where I'll play a game and I'll hear the music and like kind of pay attention to it, but this game was one of those games. So I think they did a really good job with the tracks that I heard and the tracks that I remember. And so I'll be looking forward to listening to the soundtrack for this game. For the voice acting, I think the voice acting was really good in this game. You know, I applaud the voice actors. I think they did a good job. For graphics, I think the visuals and the graphics in this game are really nice. I think that's probably the main draw that people will see, and what attracts them the most, or what attracts them the most to this game. And I think they are a powerful element that the game needs. And I think they do a really good job with the art and the graphics. It's great stuff. For replay value, does the game offer additional story content in a second playthrough to warrant playing the game again? Not that I can see. You know, I mean, unless we're gonna, if I can start up the game again and we're playing as the Time Empress, which would be absolutely amazing. By the way, I don't see that happening. Yeah, I don't see that happening. Is the game worth recommending? So this is one of those scenarios where you have a game and you have to compare it to the other games, because you could always play this super awesome, amazing game, or you can play another game. And I don't think Cris Tales, to me, is a game that you would play over a super awesome, amazing game. I feel like Cris Tales definitely sits in the okay area. Mediocre tends to have a negative connotation, but I want to use it in the sense of, there's, well, I guess I wanted to use it in the sense of like the mediums, like if you're ranking out of 10, 5 is like average, so like between 4 and 5 or something like that. Not that I assign numbers or anything like that, but it's not a game that I would recommend other games over this one, and it would probably take a lot of recommendations before I get to Cris Tales. Is probably how I would say it. Let's see if the developer is watching. So I believe this game's been out for a while now. There's been some free DLC with Audrey being added, and it's probably it's probably way too late to look at this game and be like, let's redo the whole thing, because that would be insane. But I think if a sequel was going to be done for Cris Tales, or even just a brand new project in general, and Cris Tales was being looked at as like the base or the platform to build something new off of, I think in this case for me, the mechanics just weren't expanded upon enough to make me as interested as I wanted to be, and the story just was too rushed. Like, not rushed in the sense of like the game was rushed, but rushed in the sense of like the story is moving super fast, and like we are moving from point to point, and it's happening quickly. So I would like to just see the game more condensed. Give us a 10-hour game that has twice as much dialogue, but the dialogue is all focused on moving the story forward and the characters interacting with one another, and I think that would be a great place to have a new game be built upon. So I think the dialogue was fine. I enjoyed the dialogue. There were some funny moments. There were some somber moments and things like that. I don't think the writing needs to change necessarily. I just think that there needs to be more elaboration on the story department. And I would like to see the mechanics just taken to the next level. Let's dial it up to 3 this time instead of 1, or what have you. Let's make it bigger and better. So, I guess to reiterate my overall thoughts, because this has been a long one. Yeah, I would probably say the game is okay. Probably on the lower half of okay. I don't think that my time was wasted playing this game. I don't feel that I regret playing this game. But I do feel that the opportunity was there to create something more, and I see it, like it's right there, and it wasn't taken to that level, and I guess that's rough for me, because there's a lot of great ideas that are in the game, and there's a lot of great ideas that could have been added to improve upon the game, and it's tough to be in that scenario, I suppose. I guess most games are like that, you know. But game development is tough, so I understand, you know, how we got to the game that we did, or why the game was approached in the way that it was. But that's gonna wrap it up for me for today. That was a long process. Thanks for watching, appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow, 7 a.m. Pacific, to play something. We'll see what that is. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. See you the next time I see you. Peace.